The sharp crack echoed through the water like a gunshot, my ankle twisting unnaturally mid-dive on that first practice. Chlorine burned my eyes as I surfaced, gasping, the pool deck blurring into a frenzy of shouts and splashing feet. Teammates hovered at the edge, their faces a mix of shock and hesitation, while Coach Eliza stood distant on the sidelines, her silhouette commanding, arms crossed over her clipboard. I was the new rookie, Maya, fresh from a full scholarship that hung on every stroke, every flawless entry. Her reputation as the unyielding force behind national titles made her seem untouchable, a wall of precision and distance. Pain shot up my leg, hot and unrelenting, as she finally moved, striding forward with measured steps. Her eyes dark and unreadable, locked on mine. She knelt at the pool's edge, extending a hand that gripped my arm firmly, pulling me from the water with a strength that steadied more than my body. The ambulance ride blurred into sterile white walls, the throbbing in my ankle a relentless pulse that drowned out the paramedics' voices. I lay on the gurney, alone in the harsh fluorescence of the emergency room, the isolation hitting harder than the pain. As the newest on the team, I hadn't yet earned those frantic texts or visits, just the scholarship papers clutched in my fist like a lifeline. Hours stretched, the clock ticking past midnight, my mind replaying the dive over and over, the perfect arc ruined, my dreams of nationals fracturing with that snap. The door swung open finally, and there she was, Coach Eliza, coat draped over her arm, hair still pulled into that severe ponytail, her presence filling the cramped space like a sudden draft. She nodded curtly to the nurse, her professional mask intact, but I caught the faint tightening around her eyes, a flicker of something masked as duty. "You're here," I managed, voice small against the beeps of machines. "Team policy," she replied, voice even, settling into the chair beside the bed. Yet she didn't check her phone, didn't pace like someone fulfilling an obligation. The doctor entered soon after, charts in hand, his face etched with the kind of practiced sympathy that made my stomach drop. "Compound fracture in the ankle, Maya. Clean break, but it'll need surgery and at least 3 months off the water. Possibly more if rehab doesn't go smoothly." His words landed heavy, each one chipping at the foundation I'd built. The scholarship tied to performance, the spot on the roster that rookies fought for, the unspoken threat of being cut if I couldn't return at full strength. I stared at the ceiling, the ache spreading from bone to chest, vulnerability raw under the thin gown. Coach Eliza leaned forward, her questions sharp and precise. Recovery timelines, surgical options, return-to-play protocols. Her demeanor a shield that kept the panic at bay, even as I sensed the concern threading beneath. When the nurse fitted the temporary brace, adjusting straps with clinical efficiency, Eliza's hand intervened, subtle but insistent. Her fingers brushed mine aside, repositioning the Velcro with a touch that was firm yet careful. Calluses from years of gripping lane ropes grazing my skin. The contact lingered a second too long, warm against the cool air, sending an unexpected shiver through me, not just from pain, but from the weight of her attention, undivided, piercing. She met my gaze then, unreadable as ever, but the air between us thickened, my exposure laid bare under that steady scrutiny, an internal ache blooming where fear and something unnamed intertwined. Back at the training facility the next morning, the mandatory rehab sessions began in the empty physio room, fluorescent lights humming over mats and resistance bands, the scent of liniment sharp in the quiet. The physio room felt like a sealed chamber, its walls lined with mirrors that reflected every strained movement back at me, amplifying the awkwardness of our solitude. Coach Eliza entered without preamble, her athletic wear crisp and unyielding, a timer clipped to her waistband like a sentinel. She gestured to the mat, her voice cutting through the hum of the air conditioner. "Start with ankle circles, 10 each direction, controlled." I nodded, propping myself on the padded bench, the brace heavy against my skin as I attempted the motion. The first rotation sent a jolt up my leg, sharp and insistent, forcing a hiss through my teeth. She watched from a few feet away, arms folded, her posture a study in restraint. No hovering, no unnecessary words, just that clinical precision that made the space feel smaller, the silence thicker. As the sessions wore on, her involvement deepened, inevitably. "Here," she said one afternoon, kneeling beside me for the resistance band pulls, her hands enveloping mine to adjust the tension. Those palms, calloused from years of gripping stopwatches and lane dividers, roughened by the endless grip of coaching life, pressed against my fingers with a firmness that belied their gentleness. I felt the texture, the subtle ridges earned from Olympic trials and team drills, as she guided the band around my foot, her touch lingering just enough to secure the loop. The contact was professional, meant to correct form, yet it stirred something in the sterile air, a warmth that seeped through the fabric of my sweats. I tried not to notice how her proximity filled the room, her breath steady and measured, contrasting the ragged edge of mine. Failure came quickly in those early days. I'd push for a heel raise, only for my ankle to buckle midway, the band snapping back with a sting that echoed my frustration. "Again," she'd command, not harshly, but with an expectation that brooked no excuses. Sweat beaded on my forehead as I repeated the reps, muscles quivering under the strain, each failed attempt building a tension that hummed between us like an unstrung wire. She'd step closer then, her shadow falling over me, hands steadying my calf with that same precise grip, fingers splaying just above the brace, applying counter pressure to ease the tremor. The frustration coiled in my chest, not just from the pain, but from the vulnerability of it all. Lying there, exposed in my weakness, while she remained the unassailable force, her composure a fortress I couldn't breach. Glances became our unspoken language. During a particularly grueling set of isometric holds, our eyes met in the mirror's reflection. Mine pleading for reprieve, hers holding a depth that softened the edges of her usual reserve. "Breathe through it," she murmured, her voice low, carrying an encouragement that felt personal, woven into the quiet. It wasn't praise, not overtly, but the way her tone dipped, acknowledging the effort without coddling, made the burn in my leg feel shared, the ache less isolating. I'd hold the position longer then, drawing on that subtle thread, her presence at anchor amid the faltering. Evenings brought reflections that lingered like the echo of liniment in my nostrils. Back in my dorm, the day's tension replayed in my mind. The charge in the room, electric and unnamed, her hands on me, not just corrective, but connective. One session ended with a rare crack in her facade, a smile, fleeting as it ghosted her lips when I completed a full set without wincing. "Progress," she said simply, but the curve of her mouth, the way her eyes warmed for that instant, hinted at something beneath the surface, a composure fraying at the seams. It left me unsettled, the vulnerability not just in my injury, but in the pull toward her, steady and undeniable. As weeks passed, the routine deepened into unexpected conversations after hours, the physio room's lights dimming as we lingered over cooldowns. The physio room's routine had softened by then, the initial stiffness giving way to a rhythm that felt almost companionable, though the air still hummed with unspoken layers. One evening, as the sun dipped low and cast long shadows across the mats, we lingered after the stretches, my ankle propped on a foam roller while she packed away the bands. Silence stretched, heavy and charged, until I broke it, needing to fill the space with something other than the echo of my breaths. I grew up in a nothing town in Ohio, I said, voice tentative, tracing the edge of the mat with my finger. Pool was the only place that didn't feel small. My dad drove 2 hours each way for practices, just so I could chase this. The words spilled out, unbidden, carrying the weight of cornfields and faded scholarships, the life I'd left behind for this chance. She paused, towel draped over her shoulder, her eyes meeting mine with that unreadable depth. Not pity, but a quiet recognition that made the room feel intimate, walls closing in like a shared secret. Ohio, she echoed, settling onto the bench across from me, her posture easing just a fraction. I know small towns, the kind that swallow dreams if you let them. Her response was guarded, a door cracked open rather than flung wide, but it revealed glimpses. The Olympic scars she rarely mentioned, a shoulder injury that ended her own diving career at 25. The gold medal that slipped away in a pool much like this one, under lights that burned too bright. She spoke of it in fragments, her voice low and measured as if testing the words for weight. The pressure of national expectations, the isolation of training camps where vulnerability was a luxury no one could afford. It was the first time I'd seen the cracks in her armor, not as weakness, but as the map of battles fought alone. Her composure forged in those losses. The next session shifted to the pool, shallow end only for balance work, the water lapping gently at our waists like a hesitant confession. Watch the alignment, she instructed, wading closer to demonstrate a modified stroke, her body cutting through the surface with the economy of someone who'd once owned it. I mirrored her, arms slicing forward, but my balance faltered, the brace pulling unevenly. She moved instinctively, her hand pressing against my lower back to steady me, the contact firm through the cool water. Bodies close now, inches apart in the turquoise haze, her form a formidable presence, shoulders broad from years of resistance, the subtle play of muscles under her suit evoking control I'd only glimpsed from afar. The demonstration blurred into guidance, her fingers tracing the path of my arm, adjusting the angle with a touch that lingered, warm against the chill, her breath syncing with the ripples we created. Then the slip. As I pivoted for the next rep, her hand grazed my side. Accidental, sliding along the curve of my hip before catching on the brace strap. Time slowed, the warmth of her palm seeping through the fabric. A jolt, sharp and electric, that neither of us acknowledged. She withdrew, slowly, clearing her throat, while I focused on the water's surface, heart pounding in the silence that followed. It hung there, unspoken, the space between us charged with a magnetism that pulled despite the rules etched into every team handbook, every sidelong glance from the deck. That night, as we toweled off in the dimming light, the words came unfiltered. What if I don't come back from this? I confessed, voice cracking. The fear of losing the sport, of becoming just another faded dream from Ohio, clawing at my throat. The team's moving on without me. I'll be the rookie who broke on day one. She turned, eyes softening in a way that pierced, her hand resting briefly on my shoulder, the weight affirming. Resilience isn't about never breaking, she said quietly, her tone threaded with that same guarded truth from her past. It's about what you build from the pieces. You've got it, Maya, more than most. The affirmation settled like balm, simple yet profound, shifting something fundamental. Her presence, once distant authority, became a sanctuary amid the team's mounting pressures, the whispers of roster cuts and practice drills I watched from the sidelines. Yet the injury's setback loomed, a sudden flare during a home stretch that demanded more intensive one-on-one time, drawing us closer in the quiet hours, proximity amplifying every unspoken pull. The flare-up hit without warning, a vicious twist during what should have been a simple balance drill in the shallow end, the water's resistance turning traitor as my ankle buckled beneath me. I gasped, the pain lancing up my leg like fire through wet silk, my body pitching forward into the chlorinated embrace. Time fractured in that instant, the pool's surface rippling wildly around me. But before I could sink fully, her arms were there. Coach Eliza's grip closing around my waist with an urgency that belied her usual reserve. She hauled me upright, one hand splayed firm across my midsection, the other bracing my thigh, her strength a counterforce to the chaos, holding me steady as waves lapped at our joined forms. The contact pressed through my suit, warm and unyielding, her fingers digging just enough to anchor me, the heat of her palm seeping into my side like an unspoken promise amid the sting. "Easy," she breathed, close enough that her words vibrated against my ear, her breath mingling with the steam rising from the water. In that moment, the professional distance fractured, her body a shield that made the pain feel shared, the vulnerability not entirely mine alone. She guided me to the edge without a word, her hold lingering until my feet found the steps, the echo of her touch a phantom warmth as I collapsed onto the deck, trembling. The session ended abruptly, the physio room's door clicking shut behind us later that evening, but the setback demanded escalation. Daily intensives now, her oversight unyielding, as if the injury had carved a deeper path between us, demanding proximity to mend what had cracked. The call came late that night, my phone buzzing on the nightstand in the dim glow of my dorm, pulling me from a fitful half-sleep haunted by the pool's blue haze. Her name lit the screen, unexpected, and I answered with a throat tight from the day's residue. "Maya," she said, voice softer than the sharp commands on deck, stripped of the timer-click precision, carrying instead a quiet concern that wrapped around the line like fog. "How's the pain? Be honest." I hesitated, the ache still throbbing dully under the ice pack, but her tone coaxed the truth out. The swelling that wouldn't quit, the fear gnawing at my edges that this might end me before I began. She listened without interruption, her responses measured yet threaded with something warmer, questions probing not just the physical, but the toll it took. The isolation of sidelined practices where teammates swam past without a glance. It was the first time her voice felt like this, intimate in the dark, a bridge across the miles between her office and my bed, easing the knot in my chest with its steady rhythm. The next session blurred into confession. The room dimmed against the afternoon glare. Mats scattered like forgotten intentions. As I recounted the flare's aftermath, she set aside the resistance bands, her expression shifting from clinical to shadowed. "I know that fear," she admitted, voice low, settling beside me on the bench, the space between us narrowing like a held breath. She shared then, fragments of her own undoing. A torn rotator cuff at the Olympic qualifiers, the dive that promised gold twisting into agony mid-air. The arena's roar fading to silence as surgeons mapped the wreckage of her shoulder. "It ended everything," she said, eyes distant, tracing the scar hidden under her sleeve, a thin white line I'd never noticed. "The team moved on, I rebuilt in the ruins, but the vulnerability, it lingers, a cage you carry." Her words mirrored my own fractures, vulnerability echoing back, her guarded shell cracking to reveal the woman who'd forged composure from loss, the isolation that mirrored mine yet felt vast in her telling. In that sharing, the air thickened, her past a thread weaving into my present, binding us in the quiet ache of what sport demands and what it steals. To ease the fresh tension, she suggested a massage, her hands already reaching for the oil, the room's humidity amplifying every subtle shift. "Lie back," she instructed, voice even. But as her fingers worked into my calf, gentle circles above the brace, kneading the knotted muscles with careful pressure, the implied heat built, a slow simmer under her touch. The oil warmed on contact, her palms gliding with precision born of knowing bodies in motion, thumbs pressing into the taut lines with a rhythm that bordered on soothing intimacy, the friction stirring a longing deep in my core, boundaries blurring in the dim light where shadows played across her focused face. Each glide sent warmth radiating, not just relief, but a pull toward her nearness, the space charged with the weight of restraint. I closed my eyes against it, the internal stir a quiet storm, her presence both sanctuary and temptation, the professional line thinning like mist under sun. Yet as the sessions intensified, the team began to notice our closeness. The lingering doors, the after-hours lights in the physio wing, whispers igniting like dry tinder, forbidden tension coiling in the locker room air. The sidelong looks started subtly, like ripples disturbing the pool's surface during group practices, where I hobbled on crutches along the deck, watching my teammates slice through lanes with effortless power. Sarah, the team captain with her sharp freestyle stroke, would glance my way mid-set, her eyes narrowing as Coach Eliza called out a correction not to her but to the group, her voice carrying that familiar precision. Yet in the breaks, when water beaded on their skin and laughter echoed off the tiles, the murmurs began. Low voices in the huddle, heads tilting toward me as if I were the anomaly, the rookie soaking up too much of the coach's time. "Maya gets all the private sessions," one whispered to another, the words drifting like chlorine vapor, laced with accusation. Favoritism, they implied, the kind that bent rules for the scholarship kid who'd cracked on day one. I felt it in the way invitations to post-practice coffee dried up, the casual camaraderie turning cool, isolating me further in the very team I'd fought to join. The rumors festered, unspoken judgments that made every crutch step feel scrutinized, the air in the natatorium thickening with their weight. She noticed, of course. Coach Eliza's awareness was as keen as her whistle's blast, and the shift came gradually, a deliberate pulling back that left the physio room colder than the pool in winter. Sessions shortened by 10 minutes, her instructions clipped over the phone instead of in person. The door left ajar during our remaining time together, as if to invite scrutiny. "Focus on the protocol," she'd say, handing me the resistance bands without the guiding touch, her hands retreating to her clipboard, fingers tapping a rhythm that betrayed the tension coiling beneath her skin. It was protection, I knew, for her position, the program's reputation, the invisible lines drawn by athletic associations that forbade anything blurring the coach-player divide. Yet it stung, that enforced distance, turning our shared silences into voids, her presence a ghost in the room where warmth had begun to build. I caught her lingering at the threshold once, eyes tracing my form as I worked alone, the pull evident in the way her shoulders tensed before she turned away, enforcing the barrier to shield us both from the whispers that could unravel everything. The ache of it boiled over in the locker room shadows one humid afternoon, the steam from showers curling like smoke as the team filed out, leaving me to change in the dim corner, crutches propped against the bench. She entered then, retrieving a forgotten timer from her locker, the space suddenly intimate, the scent of eucalyptus soap mingling with the faint liniment on my skin. I couldn't hold it back, the frustration, the unspoken feelings that had rooted deep during those sessions, vulnerability twisting into confrontation. "They're talking," I said, voice low but edged, pulling my shirt over my head with deliberate slowness, the fabric catching on the brace. "About us. About how you're wasting time on the broken rookie. Do you even care?" The words hung heavy, my chest tight with the fear of her dismissal, the longing that had simmered now exposed, raw under the fluorescent flicker. She froze, back to me for a moment, then turned, her expression a mask cracking at the edges, eyes dark with the conflict she carried alone. "The rules bind tighter than you know," she admitted, voice raw, stepping closer but stopping short of the bench, the space between us a chasm charged with restraint. "Ethics codes, team policies. They're not just words. They're the line between guidance and something that could end my career. Yours too. Yet as she spoke, her gaze betrayed the pull, lingering on my face, tracing the line of my jaw with an intensity that spoke of nights spent wrestling the same ache, the forbidden current humming beneath her composure. It was admission enough, the eyes saying what words couldn't, a silent acknowledgement that the distance hurt her as much, the sanctuary we'd built now threatened by the very world that demanded it. That electric silence carried to the pool later, a stolen moment across the water during warm-ups, teammates churning lanes between us. Our eyes met over the splashes, held in a gaze that stretched the seconds, heavy with everything unsaid. The pull, the warnings, the risk. It was a promise and a peril, the air crackling despite the divide. A major competition approached then, the regional qualifiers looming with their unforgiving stakes, forcing decisions under the mounting pressure of spotlight and scrutiny. Training intensified like a gathering storm, the natatorium's air thickening with the slap of water against tile and the sharp bursts of whistles cutting through the haze. My partial return to the water came tentatively, cleared by the doctor for light drills in the shallow end, the brace traded for a supportive wrap that still tugged at every stride. I eased into the pool, the cool embrace a reminder of what I'd lost and what clawed to reclaim. My strokes hesitant, form fractured by the lingering weakness. Coach Eliza watched from the deck, her silhouette a constant, eyes tracking every ripple I disturbed. Her commands sharpened, laced with an edge born of the qualifier's shadow. Elbows high, Maya. Commit to the line. Her voice a whip that demanded precision. No room for the vulnerability that had softened our earlier sessions. Yet beneath the intensity, her gaze held me, a steady anchor amid the team's frenzy, where lanes blurred into a symphony of splashes and labored breaths, my place precarious. Every incomplete lap a whisper of doubt. The private sessions, tucked into the hours after the team dispersed, revealed the tender undercurrent to her rigor. We'd retreat to the far lane, water lapping at our chests as she adjusted my form, her hands finding my arms mid-stroke, fingers curling lightly around my biceps to realign the pull. The touch was corrective, professional in intent, yet it carried a warmth that seeped through the chill, her palms pressing with a care that spoke of nights spent mapping my recovery in solitary notes. Here, she'd murmur, shifting closer, her body a subtle guide as she mirrored the motion, shoulders brushing mine in the confined space. The proximity amplified every sensation, the faint scent of her shampoo mingling with chlorine, the way her breath synced with the rhythm of my exhale. It was in these moments her coaching softened, not in words, but in the linger of her grip, thumbs tracing the tension from my forearms with a pressure that eased more than muscle, stirring the quiet ache in my chest, the forbidden pull that made each adjustment feel like a secret shared in the water's hush. The night before the event hung heavy. The dorm lights dimmed as anxiety coiled in my gut, replaying worst-case scenarios. The ankle giving way mid-dive, the team's eyes judging from the stands. I lingered in the physio room for a final wrap, the air still humming from the day's exertion, when she appeared at the door, silhouette framed by the hallway's glow. "Walk with me," she said, voice low, gesturing to the deck outside. We moved in silence under the sodium lamps, the concrete cool beneath my shoes, until she stopped, turning to face me. Her hand rose then, resting on my shoulder, the weight firm yet gentle, fingers splaying across the fabric of my jacket with a warmth that radiated deep, chasing the chill of nerves. It lingered there, a beat too long, her thumb brushing the edge of my collar in what could have been accident, the contact electric against the night's damp air. Her eyes held mine, dark pools reflecting the stadium lights, conveying encouragement without utterance. You can do this. I'm here. Yet beneath it, the unspoken turmoil mirrored my own, her touch a bridge across the chasm of rules and restraint. My internal storm raged in the quiet hours that followed, attachment rooting deeper with every stolen glance, every adjustment that blurred into intimacy. The fear of rejection gnawed, a shadow over the pull toward her. What if this ends with a severed scholarship, her career in ruins, my heart exposed and discarded? The vulnerability terrified, the power she held over my future twisting the longing into something sharper. A cage of desire I couldn't escape, her composure both salvation and torment in the dim reflection of my mirror. Post-practice the day prior, she'd suggested a shared meal in the empty cafeteria. The clatter of trays faded, just us at a corner table under fluorescent hum. Conversation turned personal as forks scraped plates, her guarded shell cracking further. She spoke of hidden desires, the ones buried under Olympic gold and coaching manuals. The ache for connection unmarred by expectation. The isolation of command that left her yearning for equality in vulnerability. It's a slow unraveling, she confessed, eyes on her coffee, voice a murmur that pulled me in, our knees brushing under the table in accidental proximity, the heat implied in that fleeting contact stirring the air between bites. I shared fragments of my own, the small-town dreams that hid deeper longings, the sport as both escape and chain, the exchange weaving us tighter, desires unspoken yet palpable, the meal a sanctuary where boundaries thinned like steam rising from our cups. The meet day arrived at dawn, the bus rumbling toward the venue, injury risk heightening every emotional stake, as adrenaline sharpened the edge of what simmered between us. The venue buzzed with pre-dawn energy, the air thick with the tang of fresh chlorine and the low hum of spectators filing into bleachers, their murmurs a distant roar under the high ceilings. I stood at the pool's edge, toes curling over the starting block, the wrap around my ankle a taut reminder of fragility amid the adrenaline surging through my veins like liquid fire. This was the regional qualifiers, the gateway to nationals, where every second shaved off a lap could secure my spot or seal my fate. The team clustered behind me, their encouragement a blur of slaps on the back and hurried breaths. But my eyes sought only her, Coach Eliza, positioned at the sidelines, whistle looped around her neck, her stance rigid, gaze locked on me with an intensity that cut through the chaos. She nodded once, sharp and affirming, her dark eyes unblinking, as if willing her own resolve into my trembling limbs. In that moment, the world narrowed to her silhouette against the rippling water, a formidable anchor pulling me forward despite the whisper of doubt coiling in my gut. The starter's horn blared, and I launched into the dive, body slicing the surface with a precision honed in stolen shallow end hours, the cool rush enveloping me like a second skin. Laps blurred in a frenzy of arms and kicks, the crowd's cheers fading to white noise as I powered through the turns. Flip turns executed with gritted teeth, the water's resistance testing every weakened fiber. She was there in my periphery at each breath, her form pacing the deck, clipboard forgotten, hands clenched at her sides, her focus a laser amid the scattered coaches shouting to their charges. It fueled me, that singular attention, her presence a silent current propelling my strokes, the ache in my ankle building, but held at bay by the rhythm we'd rebuilt together, stroke by stroke, in the quiet physio glow. Midway through the final length, it struck. A twist, deep in the joint, sharp as a blade slicing tendon from bone, the pain blooming hot and unrelenting, threatening to drag me under. My form faltered, kick weakening, but determination clawed back. I couldn't falter now, not with her watching, not with the scholarship dangling like a frayed thread. I pushed, surfacing for the wall with lungs burning, fingers grazing tile, just fractions behind the leaders, the clock's digital glow mocking my effort as I hauled myself out, legs buckling beneath the weight of exertion and agony. The collapse came swift, knees hitting the deck with a thud that echoed in my ears, vision spotting as the world tilted, Teammates' voices, distant cries amid the splash of ongoing heats. She was there before I could register the fall, rushing from the sidelines in a blur of motion that shattered the professional veil. Coach Eliza, composure fracturing publicly as she dropped to her knees beside me, arms encircling my shoulders to cradle me against her, her body a barrier against the encroaching medics and staring eyes. "I've got you," she whispered, voice raw, laced with a tremor that betrayed the storm beneath her surface. Her hold firm, yet tender, pulling me into the warmth of her chest, where the rapid thump of her heart mirrored my own frantic pulse. The crowd's murmurs swelled, cameras flashing from the stands, but she ignored it all, her hand cupping the back of my head, fingers threading through damp hair with an urgency that spoke volumes. The public fracture of her reserve a spectacle that rippled through the team like aftershocks. Backstage in the shadowed alcove of the medical tent, away from the frenzy, the air hung heavy with antiseptic and unspoken tension, canvas walls muffling the ongoing meets. She knelt before me on the cot, medics dismissed with a sharp authority that brooked no argument, her focus narrowing to the injury as she unwrapped the sodden bandage with deliberate care. Her fingers traced the swelling, light as breath along the inflamed skin, mapping the bruise with a gentleness that bordered on reverence, each press eliciting a wince from me, yet soothed by the implied care in her touch, the warmth of her palms radiating like a quiet confession amid the chaos. Our eyes met in the dim light, hearts racing in sync, the words bubbling close to the surface, admissions of the pull that had simmered through sessions and setbacks, the forbidden ache now too potent to contain. Her breath shallow, gaze holding mine with a vulnerability that mirrored my own, the air charged with what hovered unsaid. The recovery aftermath stretched into quiet nights, leading to a pivotal private reckoning in the physio room's familiar hush. The physio room enveloped us that quiet evening, its lights dimmed to a soft amber glow that cast long shadows across the mats, the air thick with the residue of liniment and the unresolved tension that had simmered since the meet. Days had blurred into a haze of ice packs and elevated legs, the team's victory cheers fading into my sidelined silence. But the pull between us had only intensified, a current too strong to ignore amid the healing. I sat on the padded bench, ankle propped on a stool, the wrap freshly changed, while Coach Eliza lingered by the door, her silhouette framed against the hallway's faint hum, as if debating whether to cross the threshold fully. The space felt smaller than ever, walls closing in like the weight of her gaze, which finally met mine, dark and weighted with years of restraint, the professional mask slipping in the low light. She closed the door with a deliberate click, the sound echoing like a concession, and crossed the room in measured steps, settling onto the mat beside me, close enough that the heat from her body mingled with the room's stale warmth. Silence stretched, heavy and charged, broken only by the distant drip of a faucet in the adjacent shower. Then her voice emerged, raw and unpolished, stripped of the deck's authority. "This isn't just about your recovery anymore," she said, words halting, as if pulled from a guarded core, her fingers twisting the edge of her sleeve, revealing the faint scar from her own long-ago fall. "I've spent years building walls, coaching, training, keeping everyone at arm's length because the rules demand it, because vulnerability ends careers. But your fight, the way you've pushed through the pain, it's cracked something in me I thought was sealed." Her admission hung there, voice threading with the ache of restraint, eyes tracing my face with an intensity that spoke of nights wrestling solitude, the isolation of command now pierced by this forbidden pull. It was confession without flourish, the formidable coach unraveling thread by thread, her composure yielding to the truth she'd buried under stopwatches and strategies. My breath caught, the words unlocking my own guarded flood. The slow burn that had consumed me since that first pull from the water, now demanding release. It's the same for me, I replied, voice steady despite the tremor in my chest, leaning forward until our knees nearly brushed, the air between us electric with shared exposure. Every session, every touch to steady me, it wasn't just rehab. It was you seeing me, really seeing the fear beneath the strokes. And it ignited something I can't ignore. The power you hold, the distance you're supposed to keep. It's terrified me, but it's also the only thing that's made this bearable. This ache that's grown into need. The admissions spilled out, raw and unfiltered, mirroring her vulnerability, my hand rising instinctively to rest near hers on the mat, fingers inches from contact. The internal storm of longing laid bare in the dim sanctuary we'd carved from protocol and pain. The tentative touch came then, her hand shifting to cover mine, palm warm and calloused against my skin. The contact a spark that escalated slowly, deliberately, as if testing the boundaries we'd both honored too long. Our fingers intertwined, the pressure firm yet exploratory, sending a shiver through me that had nothing to do with the chill seeping from the concrete floor. She lifted her gaze to hold mine, eyes locking in a held stare that stripped away the last veils, vulnerability embraced in the quiet intensity, her thumb tracing a slow circle on my knuckle, the implied heat building in that simple connection, a promise woven through restraint. Time suspended, the world narrowing to the rhythm of our breaths sinking, the power imbalance dissolving into equality, her free hand rising to cup my cheek, the touch reverent, drawing me closer until foreheads nearly touched, the embraced rawness a bridge over the forbidden chasm. In that shared gaze, the mutual promise formed, unspoken yet clear, a commitment to navigate the path together, discreet meetings beyond the team, boundaries redrawn in private, her career and my recovery intertwined with this new, unyielding bond. "We'll find a way," she murmured, voice a vow against my skin, the words sealing the shift, composure forever altered by the rookie who'd broken more than bone. The final rehab milestone approached in the weeks that followed, our bond solidifying with every careful step toward the water's edge. The final rehab session arrived like a quiet dawn. The physio room bathed in the soft morning light filtering through high windows, casting golden flecks across the mats we'd worn thin over months of struggle. My ankle, once a traitor that buckled at every turn, now bore weight with a steadiness I'd earned through sweat and her unyielding guidance. The last exercise, a full series of lunges and pivots, unfolded without falter. My body moving fluidly, the wrap discarded like a shed skin. I completed the set, breath steady, the absence of pain a revelation that swelled in my chest. Freedom tasting of chlorine and possibility. Coach Eliza watched from her usual spot by the mirror, arms loosely crossed, her expression a mask of focus that cracked as I straightened, eyes meeting hers in the reflection. Pride flickered there, deep and unguarded, warming the space between us like sunlight on water. She approached then, steps deliberate, closing the distance until she stood before me, her hand rising to my shoulder in a congratulatory hold that lingered, fingers splaying across my collarbone with a pressure that anchored and ignited. The touch was firm, calluses grazing my skin through the thin fabric of my tank, warmth radiating in a slow pulse that echoed the rhythm we'd built. Professional in form, yet laced with the intimacy we'd confessed in shadows. "You've done it," she murmured, voice low and threaded with that rare vulnerability, her grip tightening briefly, as if to imprint the moment, the pride evident in the subtle curve of her lips, the way her eyes traced my face with a reverence that made my pulse quicken. It was more than success. It was the culmination of our shared fractures, her composure yielding to this quiet triumph, the hold stretching seconds into eternity, a silent vow in the press of her palm. We sat then on the bench, the room's hush enveloping us like a cocoon, her knee brushing mine in the narrow space. The contact casual yet charged, a reminder of the boundaries we'd navigated. "The team's rules haven't changed," she said, voice measured, eyes holding mine with steady intent. "Discretion is our shield. No public lines crossed, no risks to your scholarship or my position." Yet beneath the caution, her hand found mine, fingers intertwining with a firmness that spoke of unyielding connection. The warmth seeping through like an undercurrent, defying the protocol. We mapped the future in whispers. Off-campus walks under cover of dusk, shared coffees in quiet cafes away from campus eyes, her support extending beyond coaching to late-night calls that bridged the gaps in our days. The romance acknowledged itself safely, woven into glances across the deck and texts that hinted at deeper longings, a commitment forged in restraint yet unbreakable. Her thumb tracing my knuckles in slow circles, the implied heat a promise of nights yet to unfold, private and profound. The emotional payoff settled then. Barriers broken, not in grand gestures, but in this steady gaze. Her composure forever altered by the rookie who'd pierced her isolation, mirroring my own transformation from sidelined fear to centered strength. We rose together, moving to the pool deck where morning practice hummed in the distance, teammates churning lanes with renewed vigor. She walked beside me, our hands brushing in fleeting contact, fingers grazing as if by accident, yet deliberate, the new normal established in that subtle dance, worlds intertwined under the vast blue expanse. Her presence a sanctuary that no rule could fully contain. Our worlds collided in that first crack of bone and gaze, leaving an indelible mark where professional distance dissolved into profound connection. Composure shattered, yet rebuilt stronger in shared vulnerability. If this slow-burn Sapphic tale stirred something in you, subscribe to Sapphic Legacy for more forbidden romances that linger. Comment below. What's the most dangerous setting for a coach-player attraction?